Hi, I'm Celine. I was standing in my own wedding dress, seconds from walking down the aisle, when my sister whispered in my ear, "You were always just the placeholder." Turns out, she and my fiancé had been planning my humiliation for months. The guest list? Rigged? The speeches? Rewritten? And me? I canceled everything. But what happened next left their names in ashes, and mine in headlines. Before we dive in, tell me, have you ever discovered a betrayal so cold it made you question your entire family? Drop a comment. I read everyone. The envelope sat crookedly on the edge of my kitchen counter, half soaked from the drizzle I'd walked through to get home. I recognized Maribel's handwriting immediately, neat, swooping cursive, the kind she'd practiced for years like she was destined to live on bridal shower invitations and place cards. I peeled the flap open with my thumb, my other hand still clutching my grocery bag. The card inside shimmered with gold foil. "You're invited," it read, in a font too elegant for the moment I found myself in. I turned it over. The date? 2 weeks from today. I froze. That couldn't be right. I dropped the bag onto the floor, eggs jostling dangerously in their carton. I flipped the envelope to look at the postmark. Stamped last Thursday. It wasn't lost in the mail. It was sent late, intentionally. My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. I just stood there, staring at that perfect, polished invitation, feeling like a guest in someone else's memory. I had helped plan this wedding. It wasn't a dramatic kind of help. There were no grand gestures, no big declarations. It was the quiet sort, the kind that no one notices until you stop doing it. I had researched venues, contacted caterers, even paid the initial floral deposit when Maribel was between jobs. She'd cried on the phone that night, said she didn't know what she'd do without me. I told her not to worry. That's what sisters were for. Funny how fast gratitude turns into amnesia. I walked to the fridge, opened it, and stared blankly at a half-eaten tub of hummus and a Tupperware of leftover quinoa. Dorian hadn't texted all day, not unusual lately. Since his promotion, our conversations had narrowed into dry check-ins and calendar overlaps. I figured he was just busy. I'd been telling myself that for 3 months now. Still holding the invitation, I sat down at the kitchen island. It was a small space, but it was mine. Clean lines, neutral tones, everything in its place. The wedding colors Maribel chose were inspired by my mood board, oat milk and rust, she'd said. I used to love how we shared a brain. Now it just felt like theft. A ping broke the silence. My phone buzzed with a notification from Claire, a mutual friend from college who somehow stayed close with both of us. The message was a short video, no caption, just a clip. I clicked it, more out of habit than interest. The screen showed the rehearsal dinner, warm lighting, people in linen dresses, someone clinking a glass. Then Maribel stood, champagne flute raised, her eyes gleaming under fairy lights. "To Celine," she said. The room quieted. The placeholder, the perfect warm-up act before the real show begins. Laughter. Not the polite kind, the mean kind, the kind you recognize even without sound. My grip on the phone tightened. I rewound it, watched it again, and again. There were no apologies in her eyes, no jest behind the smile. She meant it, every word. Still, I didn't call her. I didn't scream. I didn't ask for an explanation. I just sat there and let the humiliation sink into my bones like a slow-moving tide. When the video ended, I opened my wedding planning journal, the one with the linen cover and the floral embossing. I flipped through page after page of detailed budgets, color swatches, timelines, and then, slowly, deliberately, I began crossing things out. One line at a time. I crossed out the vendor names, the seating chart, the curated Pinterest board. Then I closed the book and slid it into a drawer. It was almost midnight when I opened the cloud drive shared by the family. Photos, documents, memories. I selected the folder labeled Family Wedding Memories. It held everything from our childhood weddings as flower girls to scans of Grandma's vintage veil. I clicked Delete. The system asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked yes. The laptop fan whirred faintly in the background as I shut the lid. My apartment was quiet. Still, but my mind wasn't. I wasn't going to ruin her big day. I was going to let her do it herself. I shut the laptop lid slowly that night, letting the dim light from the screen fade into the soft glow of the lamp beside me. The apartment was silent except for the faint hum of the fridge. Dorian wasn't home. Again. His late meetings had become the norm since his promotion. I didn't bother calling to ask if he'd eaten. I knew the answer would be short, cold, mechanical. Instead, I reopened the laptop and stared at the screen again, this time zooming in on the digital guest list I'd helped compile months ago, back when I still believed I was part of something. The spreadsheet was clean, the color-coded RSVPs neatly arranged. Except now, names were missing. Ellie and Janine, my college roommates who'd RSVP'd right after the save the dates went out, gone. I scrolled further. Couples we'd vacationed with, old coworkers who'd attended every family barbecue, even a few of my mother's bridge friends, the ones who always told me they were Team Celine after Maribel's teenage tantrums. None of them were listed anymore. I clicked open the PDF draft of the printed program. I had designed the layout myself, cream and rose gold, classic, understated elegance. My name was nowhere on it, not under bridal party, not under thanks to our supporters, not even a line in the acknowledgments. I might as well have been invisible, and clearly she wanted me erased before it even began. I wasn't going to cry. That part of me was long gone. I just leaned back, hands folded, and whispered to no one in particular. So this is what I get for being useful. The next morning, I pulled my hair into a low chignon, dressed in a soft, charcoal-wrapped dress, and headed to the hotel ballroom. 5 days left until the wedding. I had arranged the original venue contracts, coordinated the floral delivery times, even negotiated the lighting crew's union fees. I knew that building better than some of their own staff. I walked in, clipboard in hand, but the new coordinator, mid-20s, eager eyes, looked me up and down and asked, "Are you with the makeup team?" I blinked. "No, Never mind, I'm just here to check on the floor plan." Before I could finish, I heard the sharp tap of heels echo behind me. Maribel. She breezed in wearing oversized sunglasses, a designer scarf tossed carelessly around her shoulders like she'd just walked off a magazine shoot. She didn't even look at me at first, just addressed the coordinator. "Oh, there you are, ignore her," she said, tilting her head slightly in my direction. "She's no one, just a stylist or something." Then she turned her head slightly, finally making eye contact with me. "Oh, you're still around?" There was a long silence. The coordinator looked confused. I said nothing. Because what do you say to your own sister when she's rewriting the story of her life without you in it? I stepped back, folded the clipboard, and gave a polite smile. Just enough to let her think I didn't care. "You've got it covered then. Great." And I left. Not angrily, not dramatically, just gone. I walked 3 blocks down to a small cafe near Charles Street, ordered a cappuccino and waited in the back corner, watching the swirl of cream mix with the espresso. A few minutes later, Stella slid into the seat across from me, wind-tousled and fresh-faced despite the stress I knew she was under, juggling grad school and part-time jobs. She looked at me carefully. "You okay?" I nodded. "Do you still have the backup files from the vendor contracts?" She hesitated just a second before answering. "Yeah. Everything's in the shared folder. Why?" I sipped my coffee, held her gaze. "Because I might need them, and because there's a version of the truth they're trying to erase." Stella leaned in. Her voice dropped. "Celine, I've heard things, stuff from Aunt Nancy. They said you were too controlling, that you were jealous of Maribel getting married first." I let out a soft chuckle, but it was hollow. "Let them talk." Stella reached for my hand. "You didn't deserve this." That's when I knew I wasn't completely alone. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I lit a small lavender candle, opened my laptop again, and pulled up the event spreadsheets. The original timelines, the invoices, the backup vendors. I made 3 phone calls, short, polite, direct. Then I wrote 1 email, Simple, effective. Please place everything under hold. Do not proceed further unless I directly confirm. I didn't sign it with warmth, just my name. That night, I didn't dream about walking down the aisle or toasts or bouquets. I dreamed of a stage being set and someone else stepping into it unaware the scenery had shifted. Let them walk into the party they designed. Unaware the floorboards had already shifted. The next morning, Boston air hung thick with humidity, and even the sun seemed hesitant to rise. I sipped my lukewarm coffee by the window, eyes scanning the inbox out of habit more than purpose, when a text from Maribel popped up. Hey, last-minute fitting at 10 a.m., boutique name is in the calendar. Don't be late. Not, please. Not, thanks for helping with the seating chart for 6 months. Just that. Still, I showed up. Because that's what I always did, until I didn't anymore. By 10 sharp, I was stepping into the boutique's high-ceilinged entrance, its white marble floors echoing under my sandals. A tall woman with a clipboard approached with the kind of expression you save for lost tourists. You're Celine, right? She asked after a pause, as if the name itself didn't belong here. I nodded politely. Great, follow me, she said, then called over her shoulder. Rita, bring out the clementine. That was strange. Clementine wasn't the soft sage green dress Maribel and I picked months ago for the bridal party. It sounded like something from a fruit crate. Inside the fitting room, I blinked. A dress bag hung like a warning. Rita unzipped it with a proud flourish. It was neon orange, and not just orange, but garish, eye-searing cheerleader costume orange, with puffy tulle shoulders and a glittery bodice like a middle school dance reject. 2 sizes too small, at least. Even the hanger seemed ashamed to hold it. I stood silent, watching my reflection in the mirror behind her. Then, from the dressing room next door, I heard it. Suppressed giggles, whispered voices. One I recognized instantly. Wait till she sees it, someone whispered. Another voice snorted, she's gonna look like a traffic cone. I didn't say a word. Rita left me alone to get changed, but I never touched the dress. I just sat on the bench staring at it. My stomach turned, not from the insult itself, but the realization this wasn't some mistake. It was deliberate. A part of me, an old dusty part, expected that maybe this time would be different. Maybe adulthood would have polished away the cruelty, but no, it had just grown sharper, better dressed, more passive-aggressive. I exhaled slowly, stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked out of the fitting room. Oh, Maribel said brightly, sipping her iced matcha by the mirror wall. You're done already? She looked me up and down, her eyes pausing on my unaltered clothes. I caught the flicker in her gaze, the satisfaction. I didn't try it on, I said flatly. Oh? It's what we had in your size? It's 2 sizes smaller, I replied, and it's not the color we picked. She blinked, mock confusion flickering across her features. Really? I thought Clementine was so fun. Weddings are supposed to be festive, right? Then she turned back to the mirror like I wasn't even there. I left without another word. Later that evening, I met Stella at the coffee shop off Tremont, the one with brick walls and uncomfortable stools that somehow made everything feel more urgent. We sat tucked near the window, the sun casting long shadows across our half-finished pastries. I need you to see something, she said after a few moments of quiet. She slid her phone across the table. Open screen, group chat, labeled, bridesmaids. Maribel, wait till she sees her circus dress, placeholder fashion at its finest. LOL. Kylie, she'll cry in the bathroom, just like old times. Chelsea, God, I forgot how sensitive she used to be. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The letters blurred for a second, but no tears came, just quiet. I handed it back, slowly. Thanks for showing me. Stella looked stricken. Celine, I didn't mean to. You did the right thing, I interrupted gently. It's better I know. She lowered her gaze. You don't deserve this. I know, I said simply. The truth was, this wasn't the first time. My memory took me back, unexpected, uninvited, to a spring afternoon during junior year. Prom dress fittings. Back then, Maribel had convinced me to pick a gown from a rack she'd specially picked. Turns out she'd sewn fishing line inside the hem. When I twirled, it stiffened the bottom like a lampshade. I didn't cry then, either. I laughed, played it off, told everyone I thought it was funny. But inside? That night, I left prom early and watched reruns of Frasier on the couch with my dad. Now, standing in the boutique earlier, I'd felt that same sting, but something else too. I wasn't sad. I was done. Back home, I sat at the kitchen island with a half-eaten protein bar and my laptop. My fingers hovered for a second over the keyboard, then I pulled up my shared legal folder. Clause 17. A rare clause, buried deep in the venue contract. A financial lock on all vendor payments should any party violate the mutual planning agreement. It was standard for dual planners, but the only one with access was me. I clicked on my lawyer's contact. Called. He answered on the second ring. "Celine?" he said warmly. "Everything all right?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "I'd like to activate Clause 17, put a legal hold on the venue contract immediately." There was a pause on the line. "You're sure?" "Yes," I said. "This isn't a reaction. It's a decision." "All right, I'll file it tonight." After we hung up, I stared at the screen for another minute. I didn't tell Stella, didn't send any warnings, didn't post anything cryptic. I just closed the laptop and stood. Because if they wanted a show, they were about to get the wrong one. When I stepped off the curb that morning and felt the chill settle over my skin, I didn't flinch. The game had already shifted. Quietly, decisively. They wanted a show. What they'd get was a wake-up call. I reached the cafe on the corner just after 8 and opened my inbox while waiting for my tea. The barista called my name. I hadn't even taken a sip when the first subject line appeared. Confirmation. Wedding cake order on hold. I blinked, tapped it open. "Hi, Celine. We received your hold request, confirming no delivery on Saturday. Let us know if this changes. Darlene Orange, your Boston tiered heaven." My fingers paused mid-scroll. Then came the second one. Floral arrangements paused, awaiting confirmation. "Hi, Celine. Confirming your request to pause all floral services for the 25th. As primary on file, you'll receive the refund notice shortly." My heart didn't race. My face didn't twitch. I just sat there, quietly stunned, because I had forgotten just how many pieces I had put my name on, the cakes, the florals, the linen rentals, even the live jazz trio. Maribel had planned the party, sure, but I had been the one who built it, paid for it, legally, and now, unintentionally or not, I had just hit pause. I set down my tea, opened the vendor folder on my phone, and clicked through contract after contract. Her name wasn't listed on a single one. I wasn't sidelined anymore. I was holding the reins. Right as that thought finished forming, my phone buzzed again. Stella. "Celine." Her voice was low, like she'd been whisper fighting. "You're not gonna believe this. Dorian didn't come home last night." I didn't speak right away. She continued. "Maribel's spiraling. She called me crying at 5 a.m., said she checked with his assistant. He never showed up to work either. Someone said they saw him at Ember last night, with Ava." My fingers tightened on the phone. Ava, another bridesmaid, one who'd giggled too hard at every passive dig Maribel made, the same one who'd said I'd cry in the bathroom, just like old times. Where's Maribel now? At her place, probably calling every hotel in Boston. She asked if I've seen him. I told her no. Then she asked if you did something. "Something like what?" I asked dryly. "You know her," Stella said. "When things go wrong, someone has to wear the blame." I ended the call, pulled open an old app Dorian and I used to use when we'd travel apart, shared location. I hadn't touched it in over a year, but it hadn't been deleted either. Last ping. 11:17 p.m. Hotel Elliott Rooftop Bar. Not home, not the office, not even close. I didn't feel hurt. Not this time, because it wasn't about him being gone. It was about who he chose to be with, and how easily that revealed everything I'd once doubted about myself was never mine to carry. By early afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the glass doors of the wedding venue. No grand entrance, just me in jeans, hair in a twist, a folder in hand. The receptionist looked up from the desk. "Oh, thank goodness," she said. "You're Celine, right? We've been trying to reach someone. You're the primary on file for Saturday?" I nodded slowly. "We've had trouble confirming final counts or hearing back. It's getting tight with the timeline. If you're here to cancel, I've got the form ready." My fingers brushed the folder in my bag. "I am," I said. The manager came out, smiling cautiously. "If the event is canceled with more than 24 hours' notice, funds revert to the original contract holder." "That's me," I said. She handed over the agreement. "One note. Your groom stopped by earlier this morning asking about refund timelines. Didn't say much else." My pen hovered mid-signature. Of course he had. He must have figured it out, realized whose name was on the contracts. Maybe he was counting on cashing it in himself. Too bad. I signed, thanked them, and stepped outside. Back at my apartment, the quiet was thicker than usual. I slipped off my coat, lit a single candle on the windowsill, and sat down with an old folder I hadn't opened in years. Inside were sketches, swatches, guest lists. The wedding I once imagined, with Dorian. I looked at it not with regret, but with something heavier, something final. I didn't feel loss. I felt done. I stood, walked to my desk, opened a new folder on my laptop and titled it Reset, Legal and Emotional Inside. I pasted the scanned cancellation forms, opened a document with my lawyer's number, and typed 3 words. Proceed with everything. No tears, no speeches, just quiet, because I had already walked off the stage. They thought I was the placeholder, but I had already left the stage. I was folding laundry on the couch, trying to distract myself with the hum of normalcy, when my phone lit up with a message from Maribel. "Rehearsal dinner's at 6. Please just be decent. No drama." No greeting, no please come. Just that. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the fabric in my hands going limp. I should have ignored it. Blocked the number. But some part of me, maybe the part that still couldn't believe any of this was real, got up. I didn't do my hair fancy, didn't put on lipstick. I pulled on a gray midi dress, no frills, no statement. Just quiet, like I intended to be. I got there a few minutes early. The hotel's ballroom looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. White linens, soft gold lights, champagne flutes already sweating in their nests of napkins. Someone pointed me to my seat. Back corner, next to the backup photographer. Not even the main one. I smiled politely and sat down, ignoring the way a few heads turned, then turned away again, like I was a guest they didn't expect, or didn't want to admit was still in the building. Dinner moved slow. Chatter buzzed. Silverware clinked. No one made eye contact with me except Stella, who gave me the slightest shake of her head across the room. I got the message. Then Dorian stood. He clinked his glass with a butter knife. All right," he said, grinning like this was some stand-up set. "I guess it's time for me to embarrass myself." A few people chuckled. He cleared his throat. "You know, life's funny. We all have placeholders, don't we?" I felt the words land before they hit. People who keep our seats warm until the right ones come along. Laughter, scattered at first, then bolder. He glanced toward my table. His gaze landed on me like a pin through a bug. "And sometimes the placeholder doesn't realize the show's already started." The air in the room thinned. Maribel raised her glass and added loudly, "Amen to that?" More laughter. I didn't touch my water, didn't blink. I just stood up. No dramatic scene, no slammed napkin. I slid my chair back, picked up my purse, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard her, Maribel, not even pretending to whisper. She always wanted a spotlight. Now she's walking off stage. I paused briefly at the double doors, but I didn't turn around. I wasn't giving them that. The night air outside was cooler than I expected. I didn't go straight home. I drove around the city a bit. Let the car hum, fill the silence. Let my mind catch up. By the time I pulled into my apartment lot, I wasn't shaking anymore. Just quiet. Inside, I dropped my bag on the kitchen stool and opened my laptop. There was one last thing to do tonight. I logged into the joint bank account. Still open, still linked. Balance, substantial. We'd built that account for our future, vacations, a house, a life together, the life that apparently only existed in my imagination. I transferred everything, every last cent, into a personal trust I'd set up months ago under my business LLC, just in case. Then I logged into our shared cloud storage, changed all the passwords, revoked access, business, legal, personal, everything. It wasn't revenge, it was closure. I stared at the screen for a long minute before dialing one final number. It went to voicemail. "Hi, Dana. Go ahead with everything we discussed. Cancel, freeze, transfer. I'm done." I ended the call. Then I picked up my phone again and scrolled to Stella. Me. "Don't go to the venue tomorrow, just trust me." There was a pause. Then, Stella. "You okay?" Me. "Getting there." I turned off the lights and sat in the dark with just the flicker of a candle on the windowsill. Its flame moved slow, steady. Let them toast tomorrow. If they could still afford the champagne. That thought echoed in my mind the next morning as I sipped my tea on the front porch. A light fog curled around the hedges. Birds chirped like the world hadn't just turned upside down last night. I didn't check the time. I didn't have to. I already knew what was about to unfold over in Cape Cod. Meanwhile, my inbox pinged quietly. "Celine, just FYI, the florist called. They said they redirected all deliveries to a local shelter. Smart move." That was from my assistant. Another ping, a forwarded receipt from the venue's cancellation confirmation, time-stamped 36 hours ago. Every detail was airtight. Across the coast, in a pristine Cape Cod venue flanked with white rose hedges and marble statues, people were arriving in polished suits and floor-length gowns. Cars lined the gravel entrance, heels clicked against stone, and champagne bottles sat chilling in silver tubs no one would open. It was 11:02 a.m. when the first sign of confusion crept in. A middle-aged man in a navy tux asked the concierge, "Excuse me, which ballroom is the Wyatt Mendoza wedding in?" The manager blinked. "I'm sorry, sir, there is no event by that name on today's schedule. It was canceled 2 days ago." Gasps, then murmurs, then louder voices. Someone pulled out their phone. "No way, I just confirmed this invite yesterday." Another guest, a woman in a blush pink sheath dress, said under her breath, "This better not be some weird wedding prank. I flew in from Chicago." And then came the bride, Maribel, hair sculpted like a magazine cover, lace gown hugging every curve, jaw locked in a tight, furious line as she stormed up the steps. "What do you mean canceled?" she snapped at the manager. "I'm terribly sorry, ma'am. The booking was officially voided. We processed the formal cancellation." "Where is Dorian?" she barked, spinning to her mother. "Has anyone seen him?" But Dorian's phone, apparently, had been turned off since the previous night. Back at home, I stepped inside to refill my cup, phone still resting face up on the kitchen table. I wasn't checking texts, but I could hear the buzzes piling up from the next room. By noon, it wasn't just guests murmuring in confusion, it was vendors. The cake delivery guy showed up first, only to be told the venue was closed. He opened the back of his van to reveal a 3-tiered creation with hand-painted sugar peonies. "They better pay for this," he said to no one in particular. Next came the florist, then the band minus their lead singer. The backup photographer showed up an hour late and refused to unload her gear. "They haven't paid me a dime," she said flatly, before walking back to her car. It snowballed. Cancellation fees started stacking up. The venue refused refunds. The sound engineer demanded upfront payment before even plugging in a cable. Guests milled around, checking their phones, whispering about what was going on. Then, like the exclamation mark no one needed, Dorian finally arrived. Hungover, wrinkled shirt, no tie, no ring. "What the hell happened?" he mumbled as Maribel ran toward him red-faced. "I thought you were handling this." She shrieked, "You didn't answer my calls. You left me looking like a damn fool." Their argument exploded right on the marble steps. Not even 10 feet away, a family friend, one of Dorian's old golf buddies, quietly lifted his phone and hit record. "This is unreal," someone muttered. One of the bridesmaids leaned in and said, "Where's Lila? She was supposed to help with vows." Lila, the same woman Dorian had been spotted with last month at that downtown bar. She was nowhere to be seen, and just like that, a clip surfaced on local Facebook. A wide shot of Maribel screaming, guests looking lost, a tiered cake melting in the back of a delivery van. Caption, "No wedding, no groom, just drama and debt." I watched the clip that evening from my kitchen island, arms folded, phone propped against a fruit bowl. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry either. It felt distant, like watching a stranger's storm from a dry porch. A message lit up from Stella. "You're trending in spirit. Maribel's meltdown is all over the Cape Cod subreddit." I turned off the phone, walked out onto the porch. The sun was starting to dip behind the trees. Warm wind brushed my face. I sat down with the documents I'd been waiting to sign. The final freezing of the joint account, the removal of Dorian's name from everything he once shared with me. I signed every page slowly, without flinching. He'd never see another dollar of mine. And as I sealed the envelope for overnight delivery, I felt it. Not revenge, not spite, not even victory, just relief. They'd built a stage for themselves and assumed I was the extra in the background, but I'd walked off before the curtain ever lifted. They didn't even notice I was gone until the spotlight hit their own mess. And now? Let them raise their glasses tomorrow, if they can still afford the champagne. I didn't bother checking social media that morning. I brewed my coffee, fed Milo, and slipped into a navy blouse, something quiet but firm. Clara Jensen's office was downtown, nestled between a dentist's office and an insurance firm. The kind of place no one pays attention to, until they have to. I parked in a metered spot, glanced up at the modest sign reading Jensen and Avery Legal, and took a breath. Today wasn't about vengeance. It was about release. Clara welcomed me in with her usual calm, her silver-streaked bun perfectly in place. "Celine," she said, motioning to the chair across from her desk, "ready to tie the final knot? On your terms this time?" I sat, smoothing the fabric on my lap. "Let's do it." She passed over a file, tapping the pages in rhythm. "We've filed the termination notices to the vendors. Your name was only listed as a third-party emergency contact. That saved you." I nodded. "The civil protection order is in progress. Your recordings of Dorian's verbal outbursts from last year? Those were solid evidence. I almost deleted them." "But you didn't," she said, "and now they speak for you." She flipped to another document. "As for the trust, your private one remains untouched. Airtight. Maribel and Dorian never had access." That last sentence landed like a soft exhale, a release of something heavy I'd been holding too long. Clara glanced up. "You don't owe them anything, Celine. Not legally. Not morally." I folded my hands. "Then let's finish it." We signed what needed to be signed. Each stroke of the pen felt like a piece of the past folding itself closed. By noon, I was walking back to my car when my phone buzzed. "Stella, you've got to hear this," she said without hello. "Maribel's on a rampage, calling people saying you destroyed her life." I let out a quiet laugh. "And people believe her?" "Not after that wedding disaster clip went viral. Oh, and vendors started sharing their unpaid invoices online. A florist even posted, 'Not a rose petal paid for.' It's brutal." I pulled into my driveway as Stella kept talking, but paused when I saw a cream envelope on my doorstep. No stamp. No name. "I've got something here," I told her. "I'll call you back." Inside, I sat at the kitchen counter and carefully slid a letter opener under the seal. One line, slanted cursive, "You'll always be jealous, even with your stupid spreadsheets." I stared at it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Maribel's half-rushed flair, always trying too hard to be elegant. I placed the note in the shredder without a word. It buzzed and crunched it into ribbons. Back in control. The next morning, I made my way to the courthouse clerk's office. This was the final step, filing the suit. The woman behind the desk wore round glasses and a cardigan peppered with cat hair. She gave me a once-over, professional but not cold. Reason for your visit? Civil filing, emotional damages, breach of verbal contract, and return of a $12,000 ring. She nodded and passed me the forms. And anything else? Yes. Cease and desist. Online defamation. She raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. As I handed back the completed stack, she glanced through them and smiled slightly. You're actually the third person this week to file against Maribel and Dorian. I blinked. Really? Yep, one caterer, one former bridesmaid, and now you. There was something comforting about that. Like I wasn't the only one who'd been burned and decided enough was enough. When I got home later that afternoon, the sky was just starting to darken. Rain had tapped gently against the windows all day, like the world was washing itself clean. I made myself dinner, salmon, asparagus, a little lemon on top. Simple, clean. I lit a candle and set it on the table. Not for romance, not for ceremony, just for warmth. Then I reached into the drawer of my side table and pulled out a leather-bound journal. The cover was embossed with gold letters. Chapter 2. I cracked it open, ran my hand across the first page, and let myself breathe in the quiet. I didn't feel angry anymore. Not hollow either. Just still. They could scramble for their apologies, their lies, their social media spins. Let them. Because I didn't burn the bridge, I just let it collapse under the weight of their lies. 3 months passed in a slow drift of ordinary days. I planted herbs in my window box. I reorganized the spice rack. I even learned how to make my grandmother's pot roast the way she used to, low heat, red wine, no shortcuts. It was a Thursday afternoon when I found the envelope in my mailbox, cream-colored, thick stock, my name written in a font that tried too hard to look elegant. Family Summer Celebration, hosted by Maribel and Dorian. It was forwarded from my old address, and my cousin Hillary had slapped a neon pink sticky note on top. If you go, I'm bringing popcorn. I stood by the kitchen counter for a long while, reading and rereading it like the words might shift into something less ridiculous. Part of me wanted to ignore it, pretend it was just another passive-aggressive performance, sent to check if I was still breathing. But a quieter part of me, one that no longer needed revenge, felt oddly calm. I didn't RSVP, but I did book a small cabin in Vermont. Just a few miles away from the lodge they'd rented, close enough to smell the charcoal smoke, far enough to stay untouched. That Saturday afternoon, while they grilled and posed for photos and probably made toasts with iced-down champagne, I slipped on my sneakers and walked a narrow trail behind the lodge. The trees filtered the sun into speckled light across the dirt path. Every so often I'd hear a burst of laughter echo through the leaves. It sounded like someone else's story. I reached a small overlook that curved above the lake. I stood there, not expecting anything in particular, just breathing. The air smelled of grass and sunscreen. Footsteps crunched behind me. I turned, and there she was, Amber, one of the bridesmaids. I remembered her hugging Maribel tight at the bridal shower, swearing they were soul sisters. She slowed as she passed me, took off her sunglasses, and gave me a small nod. If I'd known what she did to you, she said quietly, I wouldn't have shown up either. Then she kept walking. That was it. No dramatics, no confrontation, just one sentence, spoken without pity, without performative guilt. It landed with a strange softness, like something gently coming undone. That night, after a light dinner of roasted vegetables and a glass of Pinot, I sat by the window of the cabin, laptop open. I typed out a message I never sent. I forgive you, but I remember everything. Stay well. I hovered over send, then closed the tab. Instead, I opened my photo gallery, picked a simple shot of my feet by the lake, the water still, the light warm. I posted it with a caption that felt true in every corner of my chest. Peace looks good on me. I turned off the Wi-Fi. Let the silence return. The next morning, I went into town for a coffee. The barista greeted me like I was a regular. I sat near the window, writing in my journal, when a text lit up my phone. It was from Aunt Marcia. Maribel and Dorian are getting sued again. Cake company this time. It's all over Facebook. Yikes. I stared at the screen for a moment, then powered it down and slid it into my purse. Somewhere people were probably refreshing their feeds, reading the comments, wondering what happened behind those picture-perfect parties. But I didn't need to know. Not anymore. I spent the rest of the afternoon walking slowly through a small art gallery downtown. The paintings were local, quiet scenes of farms, rivers, women sewing. I bought one of a lone apple tree in a field. It reminded me of something I hadn't yet put into words. That evening, back in the cabin, I curled into a soft chair by the window with a blanket over my legs. I lit one candle, not for ceremony, just for comfort, and opened my journal to a fresh page. Tonight, I felt free. Not triumphant, not angry, just unhooked. Sometimes closure doesn't come in the form of applause or confrontation, or even an apology. Sometimes it's the silence that finally feels like home. The fireflies blinked once more over the lake before I stepped away from the porch. I didn't burn the bridge. I just let it collapse under the weight of their lies. And when the silence finally settled around me, it didn't sting like I thought it would. It felt clean. That silence followed me, weeks later, into a quiet Boston morning. The keys in my palm jingled softly as I turned them in the lock. My breath fogged up the glass door slightly before I stepped in and flicked on the lights. The scent of fresh wood, a hint of lavender from a tiny diffuser, and the faint whir of the air purifier welcomed me like an old friend. This space was small. No marble countertops, no gold plaques, just a hand-built desk I finished with my own sander and patience. 2 armchairs, a ficus tree that seemed just as eager to thrive as I was. The morning sun filtered through gauzy curtains, soft and slow. My phone buzzed. First client of the day. She walked in like she was carrying the weight of 1,000 expectations on her back. Young, maybe 23. Trembling hands clutching a leather-bound planner. I invited her to sit. She was engaged. Wedding date in 6 months. She wanted everything perfect. Her voice cracked when she mentioned her mother-in-law, and again when she said her own parents were just disappointed she wasn't more like her sister. I didn't interrupt. I didn't nod in sympathy either. I let the silence stretch, the way my old therapist used to do for me. Then I said gently, "You don't have to prove your worth to anyone. Not to them. Not to family. Not even to yourself." She blinked at me, then exhaled, like no one had ever told her that before. When she left straighter, lighter, like someone had loosened the knot behind her heart. I stood at the window for a while, watching people cross the sidewalk outside. A mother with 2 kids, a barista delivering an iced coffee to a parked car, a couple arguing softly but still holding hands. Life continued, without a script, without an audience. Back at my desk, I finally clicked open the email I'd been avoiding. Subject line, apology. It was from Maribel. "You didn't deserve that. I was jealous. I hope someday you'll understand. I really do. No punctuation, no salutation. Just that." I read it twice. I didn't cry, I didn't curse, I didn't feel vindicated or vindictive. Honestly, I felt like I was reading a note someone might leave on a windshield. Regret scribbled in haste, not repair. I closed the tab, didn't delete it, just left it. That phrase, placeholder, had lived in my bones longer than it should have. I'd let it define me, let it seep into how I held myself, how I walked into rooms, how I stayed small to keep the peace. But now, with my hands free and no ring on my finger, I could look at it for what it was. Projection. Dorian had been the placeholder, fearful, forgettable, desperate for spotlight. I had just been convenient to blame. A buffer. I opened my journal and wrote, "If I was a placeholder, it was only for the life I was truly meant to live. And that life, it was happening right now." I packed my bag for lunch, grabbed my sunglasses, and stepped outside. The early autumn breeze brushed against my cheeks. The city buzzed, but nothing about it felt urgent anymore. Down the street, my team had already claimed a bench at the park. I waved, and one of them scooted over to make room. Sandwiches, iced teas, quiet chatter, no gossip, no tension, just shared sunlight. I felt it then, that old restlessness, the one that used to gnaw at me during family dinners, engagements, birthdays, the one that whispered, "You don't belong here." But now, it was gone. Just then, my phone buzzed again, a number I didn't recognize. The text read, "I heard you're the one who turned down her own wedding and built a legacy instead. Any chance you're taking new clients?" I smiled, tucked the phone into my coat pocket, and took another bite of my sandwich. No fireworks, no vengeance, no long speech. Just this: peace, earned, chosen, lived. I wasn't their placeholder. I was always my own beginning.